morning, boys and girls. Today is lesson 10.2, and we are learning all about the difference between AM and PM. So chapter 10 began our lessons about measuring time. So let's dive right on in. Make sure you have your first and last name and the date. And here we go. It says, Lauren's family is going hiking tomorrow at 7 o'clock. How should Lauren write the time to show that they are going in the morning, not in the evening? You can use a number line to show the sequence or order of events. It can help you understand the number of hours in a day. Now, first it's saying to circle the helpful information that tells about the hiking time. What do you need to find? Well, back in the question it says that they're going for a hike at 7 o'clock. And I'm going to underline hiking. And I want you to think about that activity and look at this picture right here. So what we need to find is how Lauren should write the time for 7 o'clock in the morning. Here's our number line here. And it's showing the distance from one mark to the next. And each mark is representing 1 hour. So here we have 12 o'clock at midnight. This little line would represent 1, 2, 3, 4. We're still in the AM zone, that's morning. 5, 6, 7. So I put a circle around this dash right here to represent 7 AM. So make sure you do that on your page. Now here's some more information. It says midnight, and that is a vocabulary word, it's highlighted, is 12 o'clock at night. All right, there's two 12 o'clocks during the 24-hour day. We have a midnight, and then we have 12 hours later, an afternoon, noon. It says the times after midnight and before noon are written with AM. So everybody remember that AM stands for after midnight. And if I were you, I would write that off to the side of your worksheet so you can kind of remember that. AM stands for after midnight. So it says 7 o'clock in the morning is written as 7 AM. So Lauren should write the hiking time as 7 AM. Okay. Now, Callie's family is going for a canoe ride at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to underline afternoon. How should Callie write the time? New vocabulary word, noon. Noon is 12 o'clock in the daytime. So we just went over midnight. Now we're talking about noon. The times after noon and before midnight are written with PM. And everyone, that stands for past midnight. So write that off to the side so you can remember that. So 3 o'clock in the afternoon is written as 3 PM. All right, share and show. Number 1 says, name 2 things you do in the AM hours and name 2 things you do in the PM hours. Now, these could be different between all of us, right? We all have different lives. However, in the morning, you're not eating dinner, right? So be careful with this and think about what you do with your own schedule. In the morning, you could say you will be sleeping in the early morning, right? You're waking up. Think about like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, you're sleeping. You might walk to school and maybe you're eating breakfast in the AM hours. PM, you might be, again, sleeping, going to bed, doing homework, eating dinner. Now, it only said to name 2 things. I did 3. For numbers 2, 3, and 4, it gives you a clock. Now, remember last lesson we went over the different types of clock. These 2 are analog clocks, just like this one on my wall. And this one is a digital clock, which we might see on the computers, on a cell phone. These are more common today, but we still need to learn how to read an analog clock. Just a quick review from last lesson. The small hand represents the hour and the long hand represents the minute. Each of these big numbers represent 5 minutes. So the clock counts by 5 up until 60. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, a new hour, because 60 minutes is 1 hour. So what we're going to do for 2, 3, and 4 is it says write the time for the activity. Use AM or PM. Number 2 says ride a bicycle. Well, first you need to read the clock, and I'm looking at the hour hand. I'm between the 4 and the 5, so it's not 5 o'clock yet. It's still 4, so 4:20. The minute hand is on the 4, which is 20 minutes. Again, some of you may be labeling the clock like this. You really want to not have to do that at this point. Going into 4th grade, you should be able to look at the clock and know that 1 is 5 minutes. The more practice we do at this, the easier it will be for you. So 4:20 is what the analog clock is showing, and riding a bicycle would be a PM activity. You wouldn't be doing that most likely in the early hours of the morning, so I wrote PM. Number 3, making a sandwich. Again, you're going to need to read the analog clock and figure out what time it is by looking at the hour hand and the minute hand. Once you do that, you'll see it's 11:34, and I put AM. And number 4, getting ready for bed. 8:12, this is a digital clock. You just rewrite 8:12, and I put for PM. That's a nighttime activity. Numbers 2, 3, and 4 are a little tricky because everyone's a little different. So some people might make a sandwich early in the morning, but for the most part, it's a pretty common thing. Okay, number 5. This morning, Sam woke up at the time shown on this clock. Write the time using AM or PM. So again, looking at the analog clock, and after looking, you will see that this is 7:53 AM. And we know that it's AM because it says woke up. So you kind of want to be a detective when you read your problems here. Now it's saying math talk here. How do you decide whether to use AM or PM when you write the time? And kind of a rule of thumb is that if something happens after midnight and before noon, use AM. If it happens after noon and before midnight, use PM. So I wrote that right here. If you want to maybe write that on an index card, that's kind of your rule of thumb for deciding whether to write AM or PM. Or maybe you don't need to and you feel pretty comfortable with figuring that out after the lesson. All right, the next page. Again, 6, 7, and 8, we're doing the same thing. You're writing AM or PM for the activity. Oops, eating breakfast, AM I put. Having a science class, PM. Think about our school day, right? And playing softball, I wrote PM. Like an after practice, after school softball practice is what I was thinking. All right. Now write the time, use AM or PM. In 10.1, we went over different phrases people may say when referring to the clock. For example, a quarter after 9 o'clock in the morning. Now each quarter of the clock is 15 minutes. Like each half of the clock is 30 minutes, right? So a quarter after 9 in the morning would be written 9:15 a.m. Again, a quarter represents 15 minutes, and we're 15 minutes after 9, so 9:15. Number 10, 6 minutes after 7 in the morning, so that's 7:06 a.m. because it says in the morning. Number 11, Mark is taking a trip on an airplane. His flight leaves at 24 minutes before 9 in the morning. Using AM or PM, at what time does Mark's flight leave? So you actually need to count backwards from the 60 for this one. And when you do that, you will get 8:36 a.m. Again, last lesson we learned how to count backwards from the 60 to figure out how many minutes before a certain time. Number 12, Jenny's class ate lunch at 18 minutes before noon each day. Using AM or PM, write the time that Jenny's class ate lunch. So again, if I'm at the 60-minute mark, the top of this clock, and I go backwards 18 minutes, I'm going to hit 11:42 a.m. Right? And apply this to your own life. You're sitting in the classroom, it's 11:42. No, you're sitting in the classroom and you have 18 minutes until lunch. You would count to see how many minutes until then. And that would be 11:42. Okay, number 13. Daylight savings time begins on the second Sunday in March of 2 o'clock in the morning. Write the time. Use AM or PM. That would be 2 in the morning. And again, we have that hint right in the word problem, in the morning. 14, Jane and her dad are using their new telescope to look at the stars. They start looking at the stars at 23 minutes after 9. So I want you to underline that. And stopped looking at the stars at 10 minutes after 10. So those are the two times you're going to be writing out. Using AM or PM, at what time did they start and stop looking at the stars? Well, 23 minutes after 9 is 9:23 p.m. Or 10 minutes after 10 is 10:10 p.m. 15. From midnight to noon each day, how many times does the minute hand on a clock pass 6? Explain how you found your answer. I'm going to read that again. From midnight to noon each day, how many times does the minute hand on a clock pass 6? Explain how you found your answer. The answer would be 12 times because there's 12 hours that pass from midnight to noon. So the minute hand will go around the clock 12 times and it will pass 6 each time. Okay? Again, if it's midnight, you would ask yourself, how many hours until noon? And that would be 12. Back page, last page, number 16. Leah and her father arrived at the scenic overlook 15 minutes before noon. I'm going to underline that. And left 12 minutes after noon. Using AM or PM, write the time when Leah and her father arrived at the scenic overlook and the time when they left. Part A says, what do you need to find? Well, we need to find the time, whether it will be AM or PM. And we need to find that Leah and her father, what time they arrived at the scenic overlook, and what time they left. Those are the 3 things that we need to find. Part B says, what do you need to find first? Well, the first thing we need to find is the time Leah and her father arrived. Part C, describe a method. Show the steps you use to solve the problem. So first I wrote down that we know they arrived 15 minutes before noon. You need to figure that out. 15 minutes before noon would be 11:45. If you counted backwards from the clock at the 60 and went back 15 minutes, you would hit the 45 mark. So 11:45 is when they arrived. Now, because it's noon, because we're arriving before noon, you need to write the letters AM after midnight, right? So they arrived at 11:45 a.m. Now they left 12 minutes after noon. 12 minutes after noon would be 12:12. And we know that it's PM because it's after the noon mark. So they arrived at 11:45 a.m. and they left at 12:12 p.m. It's kind of just taking our information and organizing it step by step. The last question for today's lesson is number 17. The Davis family spent the day at the lake. Write the letter for each activity next to the time they did it. So you'd have to read over these and then think, what time would these most likely be done? Letter A says, when swimming? Soon after lunch. So I put A for 1:30 p.m. because that's a little bit after lunchtime. And it's a swimming activity, which is usually done in the afternoon. B, ate breakfast at home. I put that for 7 a.m. because out of all of them, that makes the most sense. And again, process of elimination, you want to cross out the ones you use. Letter C, watch the sunset over the lake. I did that for 7 p.m. That would be like a sunset time. D, got to the lake cabin in the morning. 9:50 a.m. would make sense for that activity. And E, had sandwiches for lunch. I put that for 12:15 p.m. because that's right around a normal lunchtime. All right, boys and girls, so that is today's lesson on AM and PM. Take a little bit of a break. Come back to the homework page later, and I will see you all in 15 minutes for our Zoom class. Have a good day.